Good evening. This is 2020 Church, and I'm Pastor Larry Enriquez. Finding you live here. Hope you're seeing me live. What's the opposite of live? Dead. So we're live. You know, we're here in this Passion Week. In fact, this is a message called Passion Week. But as we are approaching our commemoration of the death of Jesus and the resurrection on Sunday, our Easter Sunday, all this week we're focusing on what's called Holy Week, but it really makes it rich, certainly for me, and I hope for everybody else who's a Christian and looking really away from Easter bunnies and Easter candies and Easter dresses and things like that, and looking towards the cross and the significance of the cross. So anyway, I hope that these times just help us focus more and see the beauty, the horror of it and the beauty of it. So we'll look at that just a little bit. So let me pray with us. Father, thank you for this time together. I pray, Lord, that you would make it rich by your Holy Spirit. May your word be rich in its reading and in its receiving. May hearts be filled with your goodness as they hear your word tonight. In this very short time that we spend together, Father, be glorified in our lives, in the discussion and in the reading of your word. Amen. You know, this past Sunday was really the start of Holy Week, and I remember when we started Lent, 40 days up to Easter Sunday, and how fast it has gone. And I've said this so many times, I probably will say it until the day that the Lord takes me home, but how time moves so quickly, and it seems as if we get older, for those of us who are older, that it moves even more quickly. But as I talk to my kids and their commitment to their families and their children, that they go, oh yeah, time runs so fast for us too. And so it's the nature of that we're here again celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. But we started this last Sunday, the week of what we call Holy Week, or the Passion Week. And on Sunday we commemorated this reality, which is going to run through, this vein of truth will run through all of the Holy Week if we were to read the scriptures and read, you know, the last days of Jesus, even on and into Good Friday, which is the crucifixion of Jesus, and then his resurrection 3 days later. But that's that the intensity of his preaching in the temple, you know, after he rode into Jerusalem, was the significant amplification of who he was as the Son of David, the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God. That's clear. Whereas before, you know, when we read in the scriptures, we find Jesus telling somebody that he heals, don't tell anybody. Go do the right thing by the priest, have cleansing, but don't tell people, you know, about this healing. And then they would go out and say things, and they'd want to go after Jesus and gawk at him. And he even told his mother, and what's recorded as the first sign or miracle in the gospel according to John, is the turning water into wine. As Mary, his mother, is prompting him to do something great there, he says, my hour has not yet come. And so when we look at the Passion Week, it really is that hour that from the beginning of his ministry, he was saying it wasn't time yet. But now that it is time, that last hour is this last week, is that now the amplification of him being God's Son in the flesh, him being God incarnate, that now comes into play poignantly here. And it really creates this scenario, and as we read it, this narrative of the chasm deep and wide between the religious leaders and Jesus and God. What God is doing in bringing salvation to humanity. And here's a common problem for all of us, as it was for them. They wanted to have a Messiah. They wanted to have a Christ. They'd been waiting for him all along, the Son of David. But they didn't want this kind of Christ. They didn't want this one. They wanted one that they had made up in their own heads, one that they thought that they needed. And God is sending them the right one, the one that they really need. And in our lives, sometimes we find ourselves, we're caught up in creating in our own minds and hearts the God that we want Jesus to be. So that when it doesn't play out that way in our lives, we get disappointed, and some people fall off from following Jesus. Some of us just get disappointed, or we're depressed because God isn't who we want him to be. But the ongoing reality is that it is for us to be conformed into the image of Jesus, to have the mind of Christ, so that we would change the way we view God according to the scriptures and what's true, and not to what we want God and make believe him to be, which is generally our own little servant, our own little, purveyor of goodness. So as we look at this Passion Week and we see that Jesus is revealing who he is, not who they want him to be, then it becomes all the more deep and wide in regards to their division. And now the Pharisees, because there's a lot of things involved here. First of all, they don't believe he's the Messiah, so that's already like an ugly thing. And the other is that if he were to be the Messiah, that kind of Messiah, and if he were to be somebody that people followed after, even if he wasn't the Messiah, it would be ruinous for them and their purpose in life. And they don't want that to happen, so they all the more are wanting to get rid of Jesus in this last week. That becomes heightened. The apex of his ministry is the apex of their wanting to get rid of Jesus. And so terrible things happen when men do these things. So let me read to you now the next day, which is Monday after Palm Sunday, and get a sense of the beginning of the Passion Week, if we can do that, and then also as we realize that he's going to be in the temple many of those days, and the Mount of Olives, where he gives the Olivet discourse. But it's in these days and in the temple where he's teaching, and that he's also healing, that people are coming and being healed, and he's just out there right in the open, in the public, healing. He's teaching, and he's teaching in such a way that it's also a condemnation on those who aren't receiving him, especially the religious leaders. And so the animosity of the religious leaders is growing and growing and growing. And so the next day, as we'll read it here, is that Monday. Now, let me also add this, that every day this week, we're sending you a little devotion that I'm writing, just simple little devotions to just get you, again, connected and keep you connected to Holy Week. So I'll say some things you might have already read if you're reading those devotions. But this past Sunday, many of us were at church celebrating the fact that Jesus was the King of Kings, or is the King of Kings, but was in that sense of moving into Jerusalem on a donkey and getting the praises of the people, the Greeks who had witnessed, what he had done in Bethany and Bethphage, that area where he spent time, the raising of Lazarus, and they're celebrating his entrance into Jerusalem. Now, I'm not sure what they're thinking, because he's not coming in on a stallion, a steed to conquer, but he's coming in humbly, lowly on a donkey. But they're praising him with palm branches. And then he's in the temple. The next day, Monday, is that Jesus entered the temple courts. And while he was teaching, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him. "By what authority are you doing these things?" they asked. "And who gave you this authority?" Because he's teaching, again, about end time events. He's teaching about the discord between religious leaders and the actual Messiah. And the people are listening intently, and people are being healed. And it even tells us that the children were praising him, calling him Hosanna, or the Son of David. Hallelujah to the Son of David. And they hated that. But it kept their hands tied, because they didn't really want to aggressively go after Jesus, because he was so at this point, he was so embraced by the people, again, as it's meted out or meted out in the children's expression of this is the Son of David. By the way, all that is part of prophecy that is being fulfilled. So it says that the blind and the lame came to him at the temple, and that he healed them. When the chief priests and the teachers of the law saw the wonderful things he had did, and the children shouting in the temple courts, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were angry. They were indignant. They were very, very mad. So something's happening here. The nature of the Lord's public message is more intense as they recognize that he is with clarity saying that this is who he is, the Messiah. And so it goes on to what we would call Holy Tuesday. The gospel tells us that he's speaking parables in the temple, and one of it is the parable of the tenants, and the fact that this father of a vineyard sends. Well, let me read part of this to you. It's probably faster if I just read it. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it. He dug a wine press, and he built a watchtower. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and moved to another place. When the harvest time approached, he sent his servants to the tenants to collect his fruit. The tenants seized his servants. They beat one, killed another, and stoned a third. Then he sent other servants to them, more than the first time. The tenants treated them the same way. Last of all, he sent his son to them. That they will respect my son, he said. But when the tenants saw the son, they said to each other, this is the heir. Come, let's kill him and take his inheritance. And this is just, a terrible but real picture of the religious leaders and how they are responding to the salvation of God sent in and through his son Jesus. This is a reflection of how they treat the one they've been waiting for all along, because he's not who they want. And then there's a terrible judgment that Jesus speaks about, that he will bring an end to all of that. And then Jesus speaks about the fact that one day the stone the builders rejected has become a cornerstone. And the Lord has done this, and until then, the stones will all be torn down, talking about his body, but he'll rise again. And he's speaking about him being the cornerstone. But again, it's also an indictment against them because they'll reject him. And then there grows the growing plot to kill Jesus. So let me read out of John 21:45 through 57, because now the anger is moving deeper, and I would say that it's always been demonic, but with clarity it becomes more demonic, if I can say more. It says, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin, which was the ruling political religious power of the Jews. What are we accomplishing, they asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. Then one of them, named Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, spoke up. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for that one man to die for the people than the whole nation perish. Did not say this on his own, but as a high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation. Not only for that nation, but also for the scattered children of God, to bring them together and to make them one. So from that day on, they plotted to take his life. So that's holy. We call it Holy Week, but they're planning to take his life. When we read these things and we we find Jesus in one real sense orchestrating the things that are going to happen. My heart gets full for a couple reasons. One is that he's moving to the cross for you and for me, and I feel it very personal. I hope that you do, because Jesus meant it very personal, though he meant it for both the Jew and the non-Jew, that all would become one. All those who would follow him would be children of Abraham. But the Bible also speaks in such a way that it's very personal, that Jesus died for you and he died for me, and that during this Holy Week they're plotting to kill him. And as much as he's trying to get his disciples to understand and to find a closeness to them, and it happens in various ways, the foot washings, the Last Supper, the time in Gethsemane, and him asking them to stay up with him, pray, and he's sweating drops of blood. But as he's working to stay connected, because he needs that connection, they're falling further behind. And only by his love and his wisdom and his beauty is he able to keep them as close as they are. But you see more and more that he ultimately will be alone. He'll be alone. And that God is bringing him to that culmination, that he alone will die for the sins of the world, to the extent that in his humanity he will cry out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So we're moving towards that Friday. But as many of us in our church proclaim from preaching we heard many years ago, it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. Because in all these things that we're reading regarding the Holy Week, we cannot read it or look forward to it without recognizing the reality of his resurrection. That all these things will testify to this truth, that he is greater than death, that he is greater than the worst things. He will move to a place where he'll be not only made alone and thus even lonely, but it'll be horrific to read of what they do to him physically and socially. That they will humiliate him to the utmost. They will get a scepter and hit him with it, reeds, and put him in his hand. They will get a crown of thorns and jam it into his head. They will spit in his face. They will cover his face and hit him and say, if you're the Messiah, then tell us who hit you. They took off his clothes. They humiliated him as he lay in this state, or rather as he stood and walked in this state of extreme torment. And he did it for you and for me. And we can read that in the words as we read the days of Holy Week. Now, tomorrow will be Thursday, Maundy Thursday, we call it. You can call it Holy Thursday. Every day can be called Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, Holy Wednesday. Actually, today is called Spy Wednesday because of the betrayal from ultimately a spy. The Judas is the spy, and he goes and he tells the religious leaders what's happening, and for 30 pieces of silver betrays Jesus. So Wednesday is also called Spy Wednesday, but tomorrow is Thursday, Maundy Thursday. And Maundy Thursday is a day by which is commemorated the time that Jesus spends with his disciples in that intimate way, where he institutes the Lord's Supper and speaks to them in such a way to say that a time will come when we'll have this together in paradise. But until then, do this in remembrance of me. But again, Maundy Thursday is mandatum. It's a word in the Latin that means a command or a mandate. When somebody mandates somebody to do something, they're commanding them. And he commanded them to love one another as he had loved them. And in these commands regarding love, and the command regarding the Passover, we have Maundy Thursday, that day before he's betrayed and he's taken to be crucified. This is Holy Week. May you draw close to the Lord. In the quietness of your heart, your own mind, as things are so hectic, may you find time to contemplate, to pray, to seek God in such a way that our Friday service, for those of you who are part of this church, that our Friday service at 1791 East Holt, Community Christian Fellowship, that you could be there. I think it's at 5 o'clock for Good Friday service, and there's dinner after. And then at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning, we're having a sunrise service. And then our Easter service will be at 9 o'clock on Sunday. But all these, I hope you can make every single one and enjoy the fellowship and the wonder and the beauty of God's presence in those unique settings and times. To every church that honors him, may the Lord bless them. May the Lord fill them with his love and with his power. God bless you. Thanks for spending a few moments with me. I love you. I hope to see you this Friday and this Sunday. Go in peace.